We're all created in God's image, right? Well, what exactly does that mean? And is it all of us, or is it a uniquely Jewish experience? So we'll have a look at a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos and how it relates to something in this week's parasha. Shteit in Mishnah, the 3rd chapter of Pirkei Avos tells us, Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tzelem. Humans are beloved because they're created in the divine image. Chiba Yisera, in addition to that, there's another layer of how beloved we are, which is Noida Aslo, that we were informed, Shenivra B'Tzelem, that we're created in Hashem's image. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ki B'Tzelem Elikim Asa Esa Adam, that Hashem created man in the divine image, and that's in this week's parasha. Zog the Tosfos Yom Tov, one of the classical commentators on the Mishnah, says, As von dem was the Tana bringt im pasuk Ki B'Tzelem Goimer. What did the Tana use as the pasuk to prove to us that we're all created in Hashem's image? It's the pasuk Ki B'Tzelem. That is a pasuk that was addressed to Noach and to his children. Therefore, says the Tosfos Yom Tov, move on, you could understand as mitchavev adam chulei, that telling us that we're so beloved to be created in the divine image, applies to all humans, including those who are non-Jewish. Under meat is a mevodim shinei haloshen, and with that he explains why the Mishnah gives two expressions. Was in der bava nutzt der Tana dem Teir chaviv adam. In this first section of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, it says Adam, which is a generic term for humans, is beloved to Hashem and created in Hashem's image. Und in divided Bavos, Chaviv in Yisrael. And then later on, the Tana tells us that there are certain things that make the Jewish people beloved. So now you understand it, because the idea of being created in the divine image is not unique to Jews, it's to all human beings. And then there are other things that are unique to the Jewish people. Because in the subsequent parts of the Mishnah, it's describing those great elements that are unique to being Jewish. For example, Nikru Banim Lamokim, that were called Hashem's children, and Nitin Lem Kli Chemda, that we were given this treasure, i.e. the Torah. Mashen Kindinim for Nivra B'Tzelem, whereas the concept of being designed in the divine image is do by Klolus Min HaMedaber. The Tosfos Yom Tov tells us clearly that applies to the entire human species. On the nafkamina von dem legabeid, and now you got to ask yourself, as a Jewish person, so what's the practical take home for us? If it's a lesson that all humans are created in the divine image, why is it part of Pirkei Avos, which of course is addressed to the Jewish people? Because it's written about in Pirkei Avos, which is lessons on how we're supposed to serve Hashem. So that the Tosfos Yom Tov explains with a fascinating perspective based on something the Rambam teaches us, which we're actually quite familiar with as Lubavitchers. He explains it based on what the Rambam says, that that Moshe Rabbeinu in Hashem's name instructed us, the Jewish people, to impress upon all of the nations of the world the kabel mitzvahs shenitztavu b'nei Noach, to keep the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. On Zay, and not just to keep the Sheva mitzvahs, but it's quite specific. On Zay dafen mekayim zayin di mitzvahs, they should fulfill these 7 Noach laws, nit mitzad hechra hadas, not because they make sense and a rational decent society would follow them. The Rambam says specifically that it's our job to educate the world that Hashem, through the Torah, instructed the 7 mitzvahs to the whole world, and therefore they should keep them. On dos meint the Tana mit chaviv adam shenivra b'tzelem, says the Tosfos Yom Tov. That's what the Tana wants us to know when he says that all of us, every human, is beloved to be created in the divine image. Why is that relevant? Because der mit gitter an Anweisung, wie azoya davon ken bewirken koboye oilam, so is folgen mitzvah HaKadosh Baruch Hu to say. He's explaining to us how we could successfully get the rest of the world to keep the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. We don't come along and wag a finger at them and say, we're the custodians of morality and this is how you have to behave. But durch Masber sein chavivos, we explain to them, you are cherished by God. Shenivra b'tzelem, the Eibusha decided to create you in His image. And that comes with the responsibility as well, which is that you now have to do things that the Eibusha told you to do. So the Tosfos Yom Tov gives us this beautiful insight that every human is in the divine image, and therefore we go out and tell them, you can live up to the divine expectations of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Now, as moving up Pashut, it's pretty clear, as I feel like Pirish, as Adam Dom main dem ganzen min hamadaber, that even if we go with the opinion of the Tosfos Yom Tov, that every single human being is created in the divine image, is a sabakelo eicha ben Yisrael. There's no question about it that it wasn't only referring to the non-Jewish world, but it certainly also includes the Jewish people, who certainly are created in the divine image. And so effectively what we have to do is analyze on a little bit of a deeper level, well, what exactly does it mean to be created in a divine image, and how is that uniquely the case for Jewish people? So in order to do that, we're going to look at something that the Frierdiker Rebbe explains about this concept tselem. What exactly is the divine image? So you have a look, there's a mimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe on these words, Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem. And there the Frierdiker Rebbe explains as Tselem made in Nefesh HaSichlis, that the so-called divine image, that refers to the intellectual soul, which is perhaps a little bit of a nebulous concept for most of us in Chassidus. We know exactly what a Nefesh HaLekis is, we know what a Nefesh HaBahamis is. The Nefesh HaSichlis, not everybody's absolutely clear on exactly what that means. So this is the soul that allows us the possibility for intellectual understanding and processing, which effectively distinguishes us from the animal kingdom. Was ist für ein Sei bei Eden, ein Sei bei Bnei Noach. The Nefesh HaSichlis is not unique only to Jewish people. It applies to every single human being, that there's a degree or dimension of soul that allows for intellectual processing, for lateral thinking, for innovation, etc. Therefore, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, Mishnah, the fact that the Mishnah uses a double expression. First of all, Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, a fact that humans are beloved to Hashem because they were created in the divine image. And then in addition to that, there's an extra level of love that or being cherished, which is illustrated by the fact that he allowed us to know that we're created in the divine image. Gate of the Tzvei Bechinos Tselem, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, those two different expressions relate to the idea that there are two different dimensions of the Nefesh HaSichlis. And this is how he explains it. Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, the first open-ended statement that all humans are beloved to Hashem because they're created in the divine image. That Gate of the Nefesh HaSichlis Shebichlolus Minu HaEnoshi, that relates to the Nefesh HaSichli, which is present in every human. On Chiba Yesera, and then the additional level of being beloved, Noidas Leishnivra B'Tselem, by virtue of the fact that we're informed that we're created with the divine image, that, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, meant the Nefesh HaSichli should be Yisrael, is the unique kind of Nefesh HaSichlis that only Jewish people have. Vasir Tselem is Hecha von dem Tselem von Klolus Minu HaEnoshi, which actually refers to a more advanced type of Nefesh HaSichlis than what is present in the average human, as we'll learn later. Okay, so we'll come back and we'll understand what the difference is between the two styles or types of Nefesh HaSichlis. And yet, von dem Guf, was in Inyan HaTzelem, is da Tzadashove zwischen Eden mit dem Bnei Noach. One thing's for sure, there is a common denominator between us and all other humans in that we are designed in the divine image. Is verstandig, we can understand as euch that Tselem von Eden is, that helps us to appreciate that the Tselem, the Nefesh HaLekis of a Jew, is nicht azoi zu lieb die Inyanim v'avodas, and welches the Gamra is getel von Bnei Noach, is not the part of us that is designed primarily for the areas of avoda where we are completely different to the rest of humanity. What's unique about being Jewish and our unique service of Hashem, that the Mishnah is going to speak about later, where it says that addresses the unique avoid of the Jewish people. We have to be Hashem's children, not just in the image. And we have the Torah, which is very unique. That's the part about what is specifically for Jewish people. But when we say Nivra B'Tselem, the concept of Tselem Elokim, the divine image, which relates to the Nefesh HaSichlis, Nor Be'ikr, that speaks about the part of our behavior that relates to and engages with the rest of the world. Das heißt, in other words, that part of the Mishnah is talking about as euch in der Avoida, is negea nit nor as a ben Noach is nivra b'tzelem. As the Tosfos Yontif said, we have a responsibility, acknowledging that the rest of the world are created in the divine image, and therefore has a responsibility to fulfill the Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach, and therefore we have to go out and educate them. That is not just simply because they have Tzelem Elikim, was der Fall is mutalot of lasses and therefore because they're in the divine image, they have a responsibility to behave in a certain way. It's more than that. The reason Jews have a responsibility to the non-Jewish world to educate them about the Sheva Mitzvahs is because there's a part of us that is common with them at Tzelem Elikim. In spite of the fact that our specific style of Tzelem Elikim is more advanced than theirs. But what's common is they have a Tzelem Elikim, we have a Tzelem Elikim. That means they have a Nefesh HaSichlis, we have a Nefesh HaSichlis, and therefore we can and must reach out to them, speak to them, influence them to fulfill the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. So in that case, darf man verstehen, we have to address this question. Was ist negea in dominion from Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem? What is relevant or important for us to know about this principle that humans are great and cherished in Hashem's eyes and therefore created in His image? Which we've now explained, because every single human is created in the divine image, therefore they have a responsibility to fulfill Sheva Mitzvahs. What is the connection between that to the fact that we, as Jews, also have the same greatness, etc.? Why do we have to know if the objective is to appreciate the nations of the world, other humans, and their divine image, and therefore encourage them to Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach? That's an important lesson. Why do I also have to know that we have an element of Tzelem Elikim as well, albeit at a more advanced level? And we'll extend that question out to what the Rambam says too. We also have to understand when the Rambam discusses the imperative that we have to go teach the world Sheva Mitzvahs. Where the Rambam says that there's a mitzvah for us to influence and even to more than just influence, but almost to coerce the nations of the world to keep the Sheva Mitzvahs. And not only that they should keep the Sheva Mitzvahs, the Rambam is very specific, that they shouldn't do so because it makes sense, and we've explained to them this logical approach to life. But specifically, they should keep Sheva Mitzvahs because it is instructed in the Torah. And that they should know that Moshe taught us that Bnei Noach were originally given this code to live by. So this whole concept of outreach to the rest of the world to teach them Sheva Mitzvahs is a very strange concept. The fact that the nations of the world have to keep the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, why is that our issue? Why is it relevant to us? Why is it our responsibility to go out there and educate them and coerce them almost to fulfill these mitzvahs? And most of all, why is it relevant to them that this is part of the giving of the Torah and the instruction of Moshe Rabbeinu? Okay, so maybe you'll be able to explain why we have an instruction to go out and educate them. Because the Eibishter wants us as Jewish people to get involved with a mission called to upgrade or to repair the entire world, that it should all serve Hashem, similar to what Adam HaRishon did right at the beginning, where he brought all the living species to praise Hashem. So maybe you could say it's part of the overall charter of being Jewish, which is to go out there and get the entire world on board to serve Hashem. But still doesn't make sense. Why is it so important for those Bnei Noach to keep their mitzvahs? Why is it not good enough to say, the nations of the world, you know why you should keep these mitzvahs? Because Hashem told Adam to keep these mitzvahs. Or he told Noach to keep these mitzvahs. Why does it have to be Valtziva ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu bat Torah? Why is it relevant that the nations of the world need to know that the Sheva mitzvahs are part of Torah? Why is it relevant to know that it was made known through Moshe Rabbeinu? Why is that relevant to their service? Surely the most important thing is they're doing what Hashem told humans to do. Of course it makes sense that Jews have to fulfill our mitzvahs, even if the history of a particular mitzvah predates the giving of the Torah, like Bris Milah. It still makes sense why we have to keep mitzvahs, because they instructed Moshe with these particular mitzvahs at Har Sinai. That is verstandig. That makes perfect sense. We're Jewish. Judaism begins primarily with the giving of the Torah. You could say the precursor to Judaism begins with Avraham Avinu. But Judaism really begins at the time of the giving of the Torah. So it makes sense for Matan Torah. Because at the time of the presentation of Torah at Har Sinai, we were fundamentally changed. That's what the Eibishter chose us to be his unique nation. And so therefore not only do we change going forward and now have mitzvahs going forward, but even the mitzvahs we already had from before, like Bris Milah, have now changed fundamentally. They're no longer mitzvahs to a group of people who were dedicated to Hashem. They are now mitzvahs which are relevant to a nation who Hashem chose to be his nation. So that makes sense. For us as Jews, obviously every mitzvah has to link back to Har Sinai. But what connection is there between Matan Torah and the non-Jewish world? To sagen, as far Matan Torah haben sie kein gewöhnliche Mitzvahs mitzad dem Tziva Hashem zu Adam Harishon, to the point that anybody would suggest that prior to Matan Torah, the non-Jewish world kept certain behaviors or observances because Adam Harishon was instructed them, or noch Matan Torah, and now things change after the Torah. Who would have thought that now the nations of the world have to shift their thinking and say, we're going to keep the same things we've done for centuries, but now, because there was a Matan Torah and because Moshe Rabbeinu instructed it, doesn't seem to make sense. So why are we part of the avodah of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach? And why is Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach specifically associated with the process of giving the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu? Okay, so in order to understand what's going on over here, let's go back to that mimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe. So we'll understand it based on the Frierdiker Rebbe's explanation in the Yisroin from the Nefesh HaSichlis Tzelem Fun HaEden, where he already pointed out, we've already seen that the Frierdiker Rebbe points out that there's a fundamental difference between the Tzelem Elokim, the Nefesh HaSichlis, as it is in the Jewish context, the Gaved Nefesh HaSichlis Shebichlolus Min HaEnoshi, compared to the Nefesh HaSichlis of everybody else. So now the Frierdiker Rebbe explains that in greater detail. As in Nefesh HaSichlis Sheben Neshamas Yisrael. It's almost like a one-liner that the Frierdiker Rebbe says that gives us this incredible insight. Within the Nefesh HaSichlis of a Jewish person, füllt sich a ruchnistische Edelkeit. The Nefesh HaSichlis of a Jewish person feels a spiritual refinement. Even though the Nefesh HaSichlis ostensibly is just pure human rational intellect, but it still is almost magnetized towards spirituality and holiness. And that's completely different to the Nefesh HaSichlis of a non-Jewish person, which is a magushem dika verstand, a much more materialistic, almost thickened type of understanding. As is explained in various places, like in Tanya, in Perek Ches, about learning secular information, as they bring in the mention to Hegesh von Yeshus, that it fills a person with a sense of self and eventually with a sense of grobkeit, of becoming, so to speak, desensitized to spirituality. So that's the distinction. The Nefesh HaSichlis of a Jewish person leans towards spirituality, whereas the normal Nefesh HaSichlis leans towards materialism. Now we need to understand this. The inner von Seichel, this doesn't seem to make any sense. By definition, the concept of Seichel is to mevar dem emes von azach, to analyze and to understand the objective truth about any information. Was der Fall ist, die Sache von Seichel zu zutragen sich Sache von eigenen Etias und Penias von sich. That's why the nature of intellect is to pursue things that are beyond self, beyond personal interest. Ruach ha'adam ha'ila hilamayla. As the Pasuk says from Shlomo HaMelech, that the nature of humans generally is to gravitate upwards, beyond themselves. Nidvi ba'al chai, which is completely different to an animal, where the nature and spirit of an animal is to gravitate to things that are lower than itself. So the objective and the goal of intellect is always objective truth and that which is beyond self. Wie kommt es, how is it then possible, as a teva von nefesh hasichlis b'bnei Noach is verkehrt morid the mention in gasus? How can we then suggest that the nature of the nefesh hasichlis of the average person will actually suck them down into hedonistic, materialistic, dull, spiritual, or lack of spiritual space? If we were discussing the intellect that belongs to the nefesh habamis, the seichel hashayach lemidas, which is not a pure intellect, it's an intellect designed to facilitate or defend subjective responses. Because the entire purpose of that seichel is to facilitate personal interest. Was der Inyan is hergesh atzmai, when midos are all about feeling self. How do I feel? Am I in love with this? Do I hate this? Am I scared of this? Do I see the beauty in this? Is moven as der seichel was midos brings to yesha, so that it would make sense. That style of seichel, which is designed for midos, obviously is going to fill the person with a sense of self, and for them sagasis, and eventually could bring the person to a sense of being totally desensitized to spirituality and hedonistic. But if we're discussing the nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual soul, even if it's a non-Jewish soul, it's not designed for the purpose of midas. That's intellect for intellect's sake. Like, for example, learning astronomy. There's no subjective bias involved. It's purely scientific. This is how it works. It can be proved empirically. It's pure seichel. Why would the Friedrich Rebbe say that the nefesh hasichlis of a non-Jewish person is inclined towards things that are materialistic? Is der Biur in dem explanation is the Eigenschaft von Seichel zu tragen sich zu hechen von sich, the nature of Seichel to always yearn or pursue that which is beyond it, trying to understand what I don't already understand. Es verbunden mit dem, was der Mensch rechnet sich nicht mit seiner Tevechule mit sich, bittel atzmai. The whole capacity for true learning, for true seichel, requires letting go of self, which is obvious. If a person walks into a situation and holds on to their bias or their preconceptions, they can't really learn. So the whole key to true intellect is being willing to relinquish what I believe I know. Bald as a seichel von nefesh hasichlis is in yonei ha'olam, was in yonim is yeshus u'metzias, and because the primary focus of the nefesh hasichlis is to understand and explore things of the physical reality, so naturally, if that's where you live, if that's what you pursue, you'll always feel a sense of self. Because where's this nefesh hasichlis focused? On things of this world, which are things of self. Was lässt nicht dem zutragen, sich zu hechen von sich dabei. And therefore that doesn't allow the person the escape. The escape to something which is beyond themselves, to let go of themselves. And das was nefesh hasichlis von Aiden. But when you talk about the nefesh hasichlis of a Jew, so the typical nefesh hasichlis is, how do I make more money? How do I live a more comfortable life? How do I gain more followers and greater fame? In other words, it's all about trying to understand the world so as to make the world work for me. That is yeshus oriented. But the nefesh hasichlis of a Jewish person, was is a chaskola in yonei ha'olam seichel enushi, even though it is also designed to understand the world and understand humanity and pretty much operate like the nefesh hasichlis of anybody else, but it still has a gravitation towards spiritual things and more edel, refined things. Why is that? Not because the nefesh hasichlis of the Jewish person is so fundamentally different. It's because the Jew also has a nefesh elikis. Was ist Hecher von Welt? And the nefesh elikis is completely beyond any of the reality of this world. Was I pelt a bittel eich nefesh hasichlis sheboy, and the nefesh elikis is so compelling and powerful that it even affects and colors the reality of the nefesh hasichlis. Und der Fall seine nefesh hasichlis should be so far an beide Sachen. Therefore, the nefesh hasichlis of a Jewish person has a paradoxical reality. Because Hagamer is doch seichel enushi betivoy. On the one hand, it is natural human intellect. Yet on the other hand, it is attracted to spiritually and spiritually refined concepts. In the Mishnah, so now let's plug the Friedrich Rebbe's explanation back into the Mishnah. The Friedrich Rebbe said the first expression, which is that humans are cherished and beloved because they're created in the divine image, said the Friedrich Rebbe that refers to the nefesh hasichlis of all humans. And then he said, the second statement of the Mishnah, which is that there's an additional level of beloved, of cherished love, that we're informed that we're created in the divine image. That refers to the Jewish nefesh hasichlis. Ismail was in the Mishnah. You can actually work it out in the words of the Mishnah. The Friedrich Rebbe didn't just say it, you can see it in the words. Because Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem meant the greatness or the beauty of the person who is created in the divine image means as the Chavivus HaAdam B'Shteit in dem is der Var was Nivra B'Tzelem. It's effectively telling us why is a person valuable? Because they're created in the divine image, right? Chaviv Adam, why is a person valuable? She Nivra B'Tzelem, because of the fact that he's created in the divine image. Next part, Chiba Yesera, beyond that, there's an additional value, that he's informed that he's created in the divine image. Yesera means not only more quantitatively, but more qualitatively. A higher quality value is now added to the person, which now goes far deeper. That a human being has value. Why? What gives value to the human being? The fact that David created him a particular way. Deeper than that when it comes to Jewish people. Why was the person created in Hashem's image? Because he has an intrinsic value in Hashem's eyes. In other words, the Nivra B'Tzelem is a titzor from the Chiba Yesera. Because there's such a deep love and value for the Jewish person, therefore that prompted Hashem to create the Jewish person in Hashem's image. In other words, the Jewish person has an inherent value which produces a divine image. An average person has a divine image which produces a value. And that's the difference between the divine image as it manifests in the population at large and in the Jewish population specifically. An average human being is valuable. Why? Because he has a nefesh hasichlis, which is a divine image. Whereas the value of a Jewish person which is also linked to his tzelem element, the fact that he has this rational soul. It's not mitzad that tzelem. It's not because the rational soul, the tzelem elikim, gives him his value. No, fakir, to the contrary. It's because the Jew is so precious to Hashem, therefore the Jew was imbued with the tzelem elikim. Mitzadem v'aser zayid, by virtue of the fact that the person is Jewish. Therefore, therefore that person was given, infused with a greater sense of value and love, which eventually translates into him being created in the divine image. That's why he's created that way. Why did Hashem give the Jew a nefesh hasichlis? Because he's so beloved. And when you see it from that perspective, then you understand that this is the ultimate kind of nefesh hasichlis. Ba'im is the teva von ruach adam oila hilamayla. It's a nefesh hasichlis that gravitates beyond itself, upwards, higher, towards edel ruchnistika things. Now from Rambam, with that we can go back to explain why the Rambam tells us the halacha in the way that he does. Why it is our responsibility to compel the rest of the world to keep the Sheva mitzvahs. In order that a normal human should fulfill their responsibilities of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach properly, we can't rely on that human working it out on their own rationally and doing it properly. Because his rational mind is inclined towards self-interest. Therefore, that non-Jewish person needs to connect to a Jewish person who has the capacity for transcending all of that self-interest, who has a wholesome nefesh hasichlis, and then when the Jewish person guides and trains the non-Jewish person in the performance of the Sheva Mitzvah B'nei Noach, he actually lifts him higher beyond himself. And therefore, at the same time that the Mishnah tells us the greatness of the non-Jewish person to be created in the divine image, straight away it tells us straight away it has to also tell us the unique greatness and value that we have as Jewish people. Because the nations of the world need to know as the Shlemus von sein Tzelem is abhängig in dem Tzelem von Haiden. The non-Jewish world has to know their perfection of the divine image is reliant on us being part of that journey. Because, as we have mentioned, the fact that a Jewish person has a Tzelem Elokim is the result of their Nefesh Elikis. So what happens? Because the Nefesh Elikis is the cause of our Nefesh HaSichlis, our Tzelem Elokim, it naturally defines and colors the reality of our Nefesh HaSichlis and gives it, infuses within it the Teva HaBitul in Nefesh HaSichlis canal, that it should also have the natural inclination to let go, to be willing to let go of itself. Therefore, the ultimate state of serving Hashem for a non-Jewish person, which would then qualify that person as one of the righteous amongst the nations, depends on that person doing their 7 mitzvahs. That has to be that they do their mitzvahs with a link to Torah and a link to Moshe Rabbeinu. That person has to acknowledge that they fulfill these mitzvahs because of the giving of the Torah. Because that's the moment which transformed the Jewish people to be fundamentally holy. As the Mishnah says. That's when they were called Hashem's children and given the Torah. Being plugged into that invites the non-Jewish person to elevate to a similar experience. By the way, that can help us to understand the rest of what the Rambam says. Should there be a non-Jewish person who observes the Sheva mitzvahs because it's rational for them, he says, such a person cannot be a righteous gentle, but not only that, is not even one of the wise members of the nations of the world. That's strange. The Rambam just said, the reason this person is keeping the Sheva mitzvahs is because of his understanding. How can you say he's not a wise person? No, weil b'shas, es fällt bei dem Noach die Akara, wie ist abhängig von ihm Matan Torah, because if the non-Jewish person does not appreciate the connection to and dependence on the Jewish link to Matan Torah, as we mentioned, then that seichel cannot be true seichel. It will be self-interested seichel. So he can't be a chacham, the truest chacham. And with that, we can put the whole Mishnah together. Why the Mishnah started off with these two expressions, and then how it links to the subsequent expressions as well, which are also doubled. What does it say? The Jewish people are valuable because we are called Hashem's children. And then there's another level of value ascribed to the fact that we're told that we're Hashem's children. And we're beloved because we have the Torah. And then there's an additional level of value because we're told about it, that we have the Torah. So the Frierdiker explains those two as well. Why each of them is a doubled expression. So he says, it's describing two different levels within the Jewish experience. When we talk about the fact that we're beloved to Hashem because we're His children, that refers, firstly, chavivin refers to the body, the physical experience of being Jewish, and then chibi yisera is nefesh alikus and neshama, speaks about the greatness of the neshama. When it comes to Torah, and it says two things, that we're beloved because we have the Torah, and a greater degree of value because we know that we have the Torah. Torah refers to the revealed and esoteric parts of Torah respectively. So there too you have the same intention, quite similar to what we learned in the first section of the Mishnah. To get the full value, you need the second level. Just like the Chavivin Adam, Chaviv Adam, that every human has value, is contingent on them knowing Chibi Yasera, that there's a special connection that the Jewish people have. Likewise, the Chavivin Yisrael, the Jewish body, is dependent on the Jewish soul, and the revealed part of Torah dependent on the esoteric part of Torah. Die Chavivas von Gufam Sheisol hängt ab von Meides and Neshama. What makes the Jewish body so valuable and cherished actually relates back to the neshama. V'geret hamol baruch, as once discussed before, as the Bechiras HaKadosh Baruch in Dem Guf, we know very well that the choice to distinguish us from the nations of the world is a choice that relates to the human body. But Chassidus explains as that Bechiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu Guf Naiden that nikpa in Guf Pnimiusa durch the Avodas HaNeshama. In order for that choice that Hashem made to completely infuse our body in a meaningful, real way, that requires the avodah of the neshama. That's why it's possible that there could be people who are excluded from the next world, which means shegufan kole, that the body eventually disappears, which could never happen to the neshama. So in spite of the fact that Hashem chose Jewish people and even their bodies, some people, their bodies don't come back because the neshama didn't have the effect that it was supposed to have. Because in the same way as the non-Jew requires the Jewish person in order to bring their avodah to its ultimate fulfillment, the body requires the neshama to achieve the same. And the same applies within Torah as well. When a person learns the revealed parts of the Torah as well as Pnimius HaTorah, then and only then is the learning of the nigla components of Torah, the elixir of life, and not chas v'shalom, the opposite. So the non-Jewish world needs the input of the Jewish world, the body needs the input of the neshama, Torah needs the input of Chassidus.